Hello and welcome to week 10. We are going to spend the next 2 weeks talking about punishment. This week is an online class and then next week, week 11, we will meet and talk about, have another whole class discussion around the issues of punishment. So this topic remains one of the most disputed areas in the field of applied behavior analysis. Some, such as the Horner article you'll read, argue that punishment is unnecessary, claiming that reinforcement-based procedures can address all problem behaviors. Others argue that punishment, when used ethically and along with positive reinforcement, can be more effective in some cases than reinforcement-based procedures alone. It's a complicated area. One of the reasons is that people vary on what the definition of punishment is. There's the behavioral definition of punishment, and then there's the public perception of punishment. And in order for us to get to the bottom of this issue of aversives, punishment, we really need to separate out these definitions, the public perception of punishment and the applied behavior analysis definition of punishment. So some of our readings this week hopefully will help us to clarify that. But let me just talk about some of these. The common usage of punishment, if you're talking to your mother about what is punishment, I think people think about retribution primarily. That is, an eye for an eye kind of thing. So if someone does something wrong, if they steal, for example, well, then they should get some unpleasant, uncomfortable, aversive consequence. If they steal, then they should be fined. They should maybe go to prison. Or if they assault someone, they should, something aversive or unpleasant should happen. They should go to prison, or they should or pay a fine. If you kill someone, you should go to prison. Some people say we should kill that person. This is all retribution. It's somebody does something wrong, so we're going to do something aversive to them. That is a very different definition than behavior analysis definition of punishment, which, as I'm pretty sure most of you know, but we'll read those chapters again in Cooper, is an environmental change contingent on behavior that produces a decrease in the responding over time. So this example of punishment does not involve punishing the person. I think the common usage involves punishing the person, retribution. Person did something wrong, person is punished, or there's some aversives that are associated with the person. In applied behavior analysis, we're not punishing the person. We are punishing the behavior. We are doing something contingent on the behavior, and it only qualifies as punishment if it decreases the future probability of that behavior. So, for example, if I was using an example in class of someone who's afraid of the snow, of a student who's afraid of the snow, or afraid to drive in the snow, and that student was upset by me saying that and would come up to me after class and very politely say, "You know what, Gary, I feel uncomfortable when you say that, And so please don't use that example anymore because it makes me uncomfortable. And this is the critical piece, if I said, gee, I am really sorry, I just meant it as a joke, I did not mean to hurt your feelings, thank you for saying that, and I won't bring it up again, and I did not, then that would be what that student did to me, by our definition, would be punishment, because it decreased the future probability of me using that example again in class. You with me? Okay. So now, but that wouldn't constitute the common usage because there's no retribution. So I did something wrong. Retribution would be to punch me in the nose. Now, if that student came up to me and punched me in the nose, but I still didn't stop using that example, then that certainly would meet the common definition of, the common usage of punishment, retribution, but it would not qualify as applied behavior analysis because I continued to use that example in class, even though the student did something that was aversive to me. And by the way, punching me in the nose certainly would be aversive to me. So, but the difference is that in the common usage, it's the individual that's being punished. Something bad happens to the person. We know, I'm no expert on the penal system, but the little bit that I think I know about the penal system is it really doesn't decrease the future probability of people going back to prison. In fact, I believe it actually increases it slightly because people learn how to just do better at their craft. And so they're more likely to end up back in prison again. So by our definition, sending someone to prison for doing something wrong, breaking a law, probably is not punishment. No more than taking a student who is disruptive in class and having them go talk to the principal, pulling them out of class. If that doesn't decrease the future probability of them being disruptive in class, and in my experience it doesn't, because typically that's what they want anyway, then is to get out of class. That's why they're disruptive. Then that isn't a punishment procedure either. In fact, it's probably negative reinforcement. So I hope I'm being clear about this. And if not, we can talk more about this next week when we meet face to face. But this is a very, very important distinction. We have to separate out what most people think about as punishment, which is punishing the person, retribution, versus the way we look at punishment, which is decreasing the future probability of the behavior. So even if something wasn't aversive, like my first example of the student very politely just explaining to me that what I was saying was troublesome to her, that's not aversive, but if it changed the behavior, that would qualify as punishment. Okay. All right. So other issues to consider when you're reading these articles are, what do the ethical codes say about the use of punishment? So back to our process, our game plan. Number one, when we encounter a situation where maybe punishment comes up as a possibility, how do we resolve this potential ethical issue? Well, number one, let's go back to the ethical code. So for next week, make sure you're very familiar with what the ethical code is saying about punishment when we have our discussions next week. And what are some of the ethical considerations that the code says when using punishment? So this week, I want you to read the Horner article and the Lerman and Vordrin articles. Both of them are pretty long, so give yourself some time so you can digest them. And then I also want you to read chapters 14 and 15 of Cooper, which talk about applied behavior analysis, positive and negative punishment, so that we're familiar with all the terms, we're familiar with the issues for this week. And then next week we will have a face-to-face class. And for that class, I want you to read another Horner article and a Vollmer article. Both of those are in response to the Lerman and Vordrin article. So when the Lerman and Vordrin article was originally published in JABA, then there were they invited some folks to respond to that article, and that's the Horner 2002 and the Vollmer 2002 article. And then there's also the Association for Professional Behavior Analysts, APBA, which, by the way, is a great organization that I encourage you guys to look it up on the web and join it. I don't think it's very expensive. It is specifically for applied behavior and master's level applied behavior analysts who are working in the field. It really is a great organization, provides useful documents like this position statement on the use of restraints and that I want you to read. And then in our next class, you'll have read all these articles. Then I want you to be prepared. You don't necessarily have to write anything down and turn it into me, but write something down so you're prepared, because I really want to make sure we hear from everyone to present your position on the use of punishment in ABA. And I want you to cite the relevant readings from this week, the ethical codes or guidelines, and your own experiences that have shaped your opinions on this topic. All right, so have a good week, and I will see you next week.